The morning mist clung to the forest floor like forgotten dreams as Richard Hamilton guided his Range Rover down the winding dirt road. He had taken this route hundreds of times over the past 5 years, ever since purchasing the sprawling estate on the outskirts of Pine Ridge. The 38-year-old tech entrepreneur had built his fortune through a series of successful startups, but success had come with its own price. His marriage had crumbled under the weight of 80-hour workweeks, and his relationship with his teenage daughter Emma remained strained despite his best efforts. This particular Saturday morning found him seeking solace in the familiar ritual of checking on his property's boundaries. The 200-acre estate had been his refuge, a place where he could escape the constant buzz of notifications and board meetings. He had planned to spend the day walking the trails, perhaps clearing some fallen branches from the main path that led to the old stone bridge his grandfather had built decades ago. The sound that stopped him wasn't immediately recognizable. At first, Richard thought it might be an injured animal, perhaps a deer caught in the illegal snares that poachers sometimes set despite his posted warnings. He pulled the vehicle to a stop and stepped out, his expensive hiking boots crunching on the carpet of autumn leaves. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys and the earthy smell of decomposing leaves. Then, he heard it again, clearer this time. It was unmistakably human, a muffled crying that seemed to come from somewhere off the main trail. Richard's heart began to race as he followed the sound, pushing through the underbrush that grew thick between the towering oaks and maples. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. In all his years of owning this land, he had never encountered anything more threatening than the occasional lost hiker. The sight that greeted him when he finally located the source of the crying would remain burned in his memory forever. There, in a small clearing perhaps 50 yards from the trail, sat a young woman who couldn't have been more than 22 or 23. She was African American, with natural hair that had been carefully styled but was now disheveled from her ordeal. What struck him most immediately was her attire, a beautiful white wedding dress that had clearly been expensive, now torn and stained with dirt and what looked like dried blood. Her hands were bound behind her back with what appeared to be zip ties, and her ankles were similarly restrained. A piece of duct tape covered her mouth, and her dark eyes were wide with terror when she saw him approaching. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the young woman clearly uncertain whether this newcomer represented salvation or further danger. Richard raised his hands slowly, the way he might approach a frightened animal. "It's okay," he said softly, though he knew his words were muffled by the tape. "I'm going to help you. My name is Richard, and you're safe now." He reached into his pocket for his phone, intending to call 911, but quickly realized there was no signal in this part of the woods. The cell towers didn't reach this deep into the forest, something he had always appreciated for the peace it provided but now cursed for the isolation it created. Moving carefully, Richard approached the young woman. Her eyes tracked his every movement, and he could see the rapid rise and fall of her chest as she hyperventilated. "I'm going to remove the tape from your mouth, okay? Then, we'll get those restraints off you." When he gently peeled away the duct tape, she gasped and began to sob, words tumbling out in a rush. "Please, please don't hurt me. I don't know who you are, I don't know where I am. They took me, they brought me here, and I thought." Her voice broke into another sob. "Slow down," Richard said gently, producing a multi-tool from his jacket pocket. "You're safe. I live near here. Can you tell me your name?" "Aisha," she whispered. "Aisha Williams. I was supposed to get married today. This morning. At 11 o'clock. She looked around wildly at the forest surrounding them. "What time is it? How long have I been here?" Richard checked his watch. It was nearly noon. "It's just after 12. Aisha, I'm going to cut these zip ties, and then, we need to get you to a hospital and call the police. Can you tell me who did this to you?" As he carefully cut through the plastic restraints, being mindful not to cut her wrists, Aisha's story began to emerge in fragmented pieces. She had been getting ready for her wedding at her apartment, putting the finishing touches on her makeup while her bridesmaids went ahead to the church. Someone had knocked on her door, claiming to be delivering flowers that had been forgotten. When she opened the door, thinking it was just the florist's assistant, 2 men had forced their way inside. I don't remember much after that, she said, rubbing her wrists where the zip ties had left angry red marks. I think they drugged me. I woke up here, tied up, maybe an hour ago? Maybe longer? I've been trying to scream but, with the tape. She shuddered. Richard helped her to her feet, noticing how unsteady she was. The wedding dress, which had clearly been beautiful and expensive, was now a ruin. The delicate beadwork along the bodice was torn, and there were stains on the white satin that he didn't want to examine too closely. We need to get you out of here, he said. Can you walk? It's not far to my car. Aisha nodded, though she swayed slightly. I think so. But, Richard, what if they come back? What if they're still out there somewhere? The same thought had occurred to him. Whoever had done this might still be in the area. They had chosen this location specifically, probably because of its isolation. His property was at the end of a long dirt road, with no neighbors for miles. It would be the perfect place to commit a crime without witnesses. We'll be careful, he assured her, though he found himself looking around nervously as they made their way back through the underbrush. My car is just up ahead. Once we get to the main road, I can call for help. As they walked slowly back toward the trail, Richard's mind was racing. This wasn't just a random crime. Someone had specifically targeted Aisha on her wedding day, had known where she would be and when she would be alone. The level of planning involved suggested this wasn't a crime of opportunity but something more sinister. Aisha, he said as they reached the trail, do you have any idea why someone would want to hurt you? Any enemies, anyone who might have been opposed to your marriage? She shook her head, then paused. I don't know. Marcus, my fiancé, he's been acting strange lately. Nervous about something. But, I thought it was just wedding jitters. We've been together for 3 years, and he proposed 8 months ago. Everything seemed perfect. They had reached his Range Rover, and Richard helped her into the passenger seat. As he started the engine, he noticed a black sedan parked about a quarter mile down the road, partially hidden by trees. He hadn't seen it when he arrived, and something about it made him uneasy. Aisha, he said quietly, I want you to stay low in the seat. Don't look back, but I think we might have company. As he put the car in drive and began moving down the dirt road, Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The black sedan's engine started up as they passed, and he could see in his rearview mirror that it was following them. This was far from over. Richard's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as he watched the black sedan maintain its distance behind them. The dirt road stretched ahead for another 2 miles before it would connect with the main highway, and he knew that once they reached civilization, their pursuers would likely break off. But 2 miles suddenly felt like 200. Stay down, he whispered to Aisha, who had slumped low in the passenger seat. Her wedding dress, once a symbol of joy and new beginnings, now seemed like a cruel reminder of how quickly life could change. The beaded fabric caught the sunlight streaming through the windshield, creating small rainbows that danced across the dashboard in stark contrast to the terror of their situation. Aisha's breathing was shallow and rapid. Are they following us? She asked, her voice barely audible. Yes, but we're going to be okay, Richard replied, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it himself. His mind raced through options. He could try to outrun them, but the dirt road was treacherous, full of potholes and washouts from recent rains. Going too fast could result in them getting stuck or crashed, leaving them vulnerable. He could try to call 911 as soon as he got cell service, but that was still at least a mile away. The black sedan suddenly accelerated, closing the gap between them. In his rearview mirror, Richard could see 2 figures in the front seats, both wearing dark clothing. The driver appeared to be wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and something about his posture suggested military or law enforcement training. Richard, Aisha said, her voice stronger now, there's something I need to tell you. Something I didn't mention before. He glanced at her quickly before returning his attention to the road. What is it? Marcus, my fiancé, he works for the government. Department of Homeland Security. He's been involved in some kind of investigation, something he couldn't talk about, but it's been consuming him for months. He's been getting strange phone calls, staying late at the office, jumping at shadows. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. This was beginning to make more sense, though not in a way that made him feel any safer. Do you think this is connected to his work? I don't know, but 3 weeks ago, he asked me if I had anywhere I could go, somewhere safe, if something happened to him. I thought he was being paranoid, but now. She trailed off as the sedan behind them honked its horn twice, a sound that seemed to echo through the forest. The honking was followed by the sedan pulling into the opposite lane, attempting to come alongside them. Richard saw this in his peripheral vision and made a split-second decision. Instead of allowing them to pull even, he jerked the wheel to the left, blocking their path and forcing them back behind him. What are they doing? Aisha asked, finally, raising her head to look. Trying to run us off the road, I think, Richard replied. His phone, sitting in the cup holder, still showed no signal. They were in a dead zone that stretched for miles in any direction, something that had never bothered him before but now felt like a death trap. The sedan tried again to pass them, this time more aggressively. Richard could see the passenger pointing something at them, and his blood ran cold when he realized it was a gun. Get down, now, he shouted, pushing Aisha's head below the dashboard. The rear window exploded in a shower of safety glass, the bullet embedding itself in the dashboard inches from where Aisha's head had been moments before. Richard floored the accelerator, the Range Rover lurching forward with a surge of power that he'd never fully appreciated until this moment. The road ahead curved sharply to the right, and Richard took the turn faster than was safe, feeling the SUV's wheels leave the ground momentarily before slamming back down. Behind them, the sedan had fallen back slightly, but he knew it was only temporary. Aisha, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos, I need you to listen carefully. In about half a mile, this road forks. The right fork goes to the highway, but the left fork leads to an old mining road that goes deeper into the mountains. If these people are professionals, they'll expect us to go right, toward help and civilization. So we're going left, she asked, understanding immediately. We're going left. It's rough terrain, but my car can handle it better than theirs, and it leads to an old ranger station that's been abandoned for years. There's a radio there, a backup communication system that the Forestry Service still maintains. If we can reach it, we can call for help. The fork in the road appeared ahead, marked by a weathered wooden sign that pointed toward Pine Ridge Township to the right and Copper Mountain Trail to the left. At the last possible second, Richard yanked the wheel left, feeling the SUV's tires slide on the loose gravel before finding purchase. The black sedan overshot the turn, its driver apparently caught off guard by the sudden maneuver. Richard watched in his rearview mirror as the car skidded past the fork before coming to a stop and beginning to back up. They had gained precious seconds, but he knew it wouldn't last long. The mining road was exactly as treacherous as he remembered from his teenage years when he and his friends would drive up here to camp. Deep ruts carved by decades of weather and heavy machinery made the Range Rover pitch and roll like a boat in rough seas. Behind them, he could hear the sedan struggling with the terrain, its lower clearance making the journey much more difficult. How do you know about this road? Aisha asked, bracing herself against the dashboard as they hit a particularly deep pothole. I grew up around here, Richard replied, downshifting to maintain control as they climbed a steep incline. My grandfather owned land up here before the mining company bought most of it. I used to explore these mountains every summer when I was a kid. As they crested the hill, Richard's phone finally showed a single bar of signal. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. He handed the phone to Aisha. Try to call 911. Even if the call drops, they might be able to get a location from the cell tower. Aisha dialed with shaking fingers, and, for a moment, it seemed like the call might connect. They could hear ringing, then, a voice saying 911, what's your emergency, before the signal cut out completely. It didn't work, she said, frustration evident in her voice. It's okay. They got something. Emergency services can track calls even when they're dropped, and they'll send someone to investigate. The old ranger station came into view as they rounded another curve, a small wooden building with a green metal roof, situated in a clearing that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. It looked exactly as Richard remembered it from his youth, perhaps a little more weathered but still standing strong. He pulled the Range Rover around to the back of the building, positioning it so they couldn't be seen from the road. "Stay here," he told Aisha as he got out. "I'm going to see if I can get that radio working." The back door of the ranger station was secured with a simple padlock that yielded easily to his multi-tool. Inside, the building smelled of dust and old wood, but everything appeared to be in working order. The radio equipment, though dated, looked functional. Richard had just succeeded in powering up the radio when he heard car doors slamming outside. Their pursuers had found them. Through the window, he could see two men in dark suits approaching the building. Both carried weapons, and they moved with the practiced coordination of professionals. The driver was tall and lean, with graying hair and the bearing of a military officer. The passenger was younger, stockier, with a face that suggested he was accustomed to violence. Richard keyed the radio microphone and spoke in an urgent whisper. "This is an emergency. Two armed men are pursuing myself and a kidnapping victim at the old Copper Mountain Ranger Station. We need immediate assistance." A voice crackled back through the static. "This is State Police Dispatch. Please identify yourself and provide more details." Before Richard could respond, the front door of the ranger station exploded inward, and the two men entered with their weapons drawn. "Step away from the radio," the older man commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Mr. Hamilton, you've interfered in something that doesn't concern you. That young lady needs to come with us." "She's not going anywhere," Richard replied, moving to position himself between the men and the radio. "She was kidnapped, tied up in the woods. I'm not letting you take her." The younger man laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into, do you? This isn't some random crime. That girl out there is engaged to a man who's been feeding information to people who want to hurt this country. We're the good guys here. If you're the good guys, why did you tie her up and leave her in the forest?" Richard demanded. "Because Marcus Williams has been compromised, and his fiancée was leverage. We needed him to cooperate, to provide us with intelligence about the network he's involved with. Sometimes national security requires difficult choices." Richard felt his blood boil. "So you terrorize an innocent woman? That's your idea of protecting the country?" The older man's expression didn't change. "Miss Williams is hardly innocent. She's been aware of her fiancé's activities for months. Bank records show large cash deposits into her personal account, deposits that coincide with her fiancé's intelligence compromises. She's been living off blood money." Through the window, Richard could see Aisha pressed against the side of his Range Rover, her white wedding dress making her an easy target against the dark vehicle. Whatever the truth was about her involvement, she didn't deserve what had happened to her. The radio crackled to life again. "This is State Police. Units are en route to your location. ETA 15 minutes. The younger man cursed and raised his weapon toward Richard. 15 minutes is too long. We're taking the girl and leaving. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Richard looked around the small ranger station, calculating his options. The two men blocked the front entrance, but there was a back door that led to a small deck overlooking the valley. It was a 20-foot drop to the rocky slope below, but it might be their only chance. "What happens to Aisha if she goes with you?" he asked, buying time. "That depends on how cooperative she is," the older man replied. "And how much she actually knows about her fiancé's activities. If she's innocent, as you believe, then she'll be released once this situation is resolved." Richard didn't believe him for a second. These men had already demonstrated their willingness to use extreme methods. If they took Aisha, he doubted she would be seen alive again. The sound of an approaching helicopter began to echo through the valley, growing louder by the second. The two men exchanged glances, and Richard saw his opportunity. He lunged toward the radio equipment, intending to broadcast their exact location, but the younger man was faster. The butt of his pistol caught Richard across the temple, sending him sprawling to the floor as stars exploded across his vision. "Move," the older man barked to his partner. "We take the girl and go. Leave him." As Richard fought to remain conscious, he could hear Aisha screaming outside, her voice cutting through the sound of the approaching aircraft. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the older man speaking into a cell phone, his words lost in the growing roar of rotor blades. Richard awakened to the sound of urgent voices and the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades overhead. His head pounded from where the gun butt had struck him, and, when he tried to sit up, the world spun dangerously. Through the broken front door of the ranger station, he could see uniformed officers securing the area, their movements precise and coordinated. "Sir, stay down. You've got a nasty head injury," a paramedic said, appearing beside him with a medical kit. "I'm going to check your pupils. Can you tell me your name?" "Richard Hamilton," he replied, his voice hoarse. "Where's Aisha? The girl in the wedding dress, is she safe?" The paramedic exchanged a glance with someone behind him. "We're still sorting out the situation, sir. Right now, I need you to focus on staying still while I examine you." A woman in a dark suit approached, her credentials identifying her as FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen. She had the calm demeanor of someone accustomed to complex situations, but Richard could see tension around her eyes. "Mr. Hamilton, I'm Agent Chen. We need to talk about what happened here today. But first, I need you to know that Miss Williams is safe. She's being interviewed by my colleagues." Relief washed over Richard, followed immediately by renewed anger. Those men, they took her. They said they were government agents, that she was involved in some kind of espionage case. They tried to kill us. Agent Chen sat down carefully on an old wooden chair, positioning herself at Richard's eye level. "Mr. Hamilton, this situation is more complicated than it appears. The men you encountered today are not government agents, though they wanted you to believe they were. We've been tracking them for several months as part of an investigation into a private military contractor that's been conducting unauthorized operations." Richard felt his confusion deepen. "I don't understand. If they weren't government agents, then what did they want with Aisha?" "Marcus Williams, Miss Williams' fiancé, is indeed a DHS analyst, but he's not a traitor. 3 months ago, he stumbled across evidence that someone within the department was selling classified information to foreign buyers. When he reported it through proper channels, the investigation revealed that the security breach was being facilitated by Blackwater Solutions, a private military contractor with connections throughout the intelligence community." The paramedic finished his examination and began cleaning the wound on Richard's head. Agent Chen continued her explanation. "Marcus was supposed to testify before a closed congressional committee next week. His testimony would have exposed not just the security breach but also Blackwater's involvement in several illegal domestic operations. Someone wanted to make sure he never made it to that hearing. So they kidnapped his fiancée to get to him?" "Exactly. The plan was to use Miss Williams as leverage to force Marcus to recant his testimony and disappear. When that didn't work, they were prepared to take more drastic measures." Agent Chen paused, studying Richard's face. "You saved her life today, Mr. Hamilton. If you hadn't found her when you did, this story would have had a very different ending." Through the window, Richard could see Aisha sitting in the back of an ambulance, still wearing her torn wedding dress but no longer restrained. She was talking animatedly to another FBI agent, her hands moving as she described her ordeal. Even from a distance, he could see that she was stronger than her kidnappers had anticipated. "What happens now?" Richard asked. "Are Marcus and Aisha safe?" "We've had Marcus in protective custody since yesterday morning when Miss Williams was first reported missing. He's been cooperating fully with our investigation. As for Miss Williams, she'll need protection until we can round up the rest of Blackwater's operation, but the immediate danger has passed." Agent Chen stood up and walked to the window, her gaze following Richard's to where Aisha sat. "There's something else you should know. Miss Williams asked specifically to speak with you before we transport her to a secure location. She insisted that you risked your life for a complete stranger, and she wants to thank you properly." Richard tried to stand, ignoring the paramedic's protests. His legs were unsteady, but he managed to remain upright. "I'd like to speak with her too. I want to make sure she's really okay." As they walked toward the ambulance, Agent Chen continued to fill in the details of the investigation. Blackwater Solutions had been operating in a gray area for years, taking on contracts that official agencies couldn't or wouldn't handle. Their work had gradually shifted from legitimate security consulting to corporate espionage and, eventually, to domestic operations that violated numerous federal laws. The irony, Agent Chen said, is that Marcus Williams wasn't even supposed to see the information that started all this. He was filling in for a colleague who was out sick, reviewing routine intelligence reports when he noticed patterns that didn't make sense. Financial transactions, communication intercepts, personnel movements, all pointing to a systematic compromise of classified information. When they reached the ambulance, Aisha looked up and immediately smiled through her tears. Despite everything she had been through, her eyes held a strength that impressed Richard. The torn wedding dress couldn't diminish her natural grace, and he found himself wondering what kind of person could endure such an ordeal and still be concerned about thanking her rescuer. "Richard," she said, reaching out to take his hand. "I don't know how to thank you. When I saw you in the woods, I thought you might be one of them. But you saved my life." "I just did what anyone would do," Richard replied, though he knew that wasn't entirely true. Many people would have called 911 and left it to the professionals. His decision to get personally involved had made all the difference. "No," Aisha said firmly. "You put yourself in danger for someone you didn't know. You could have been killed." She paused, fresh tears forming in her eyes. "Today was supposed to be my wedding day. Marcus and I had planned everything perfectly, or so we thought. Instead, I woke up tied to a tree in a torn dress, terrified that I would never see him again." Agent Chen stepped forward. "Miss Williams, we need to get you to a secure location. The men who took you were part of a larger organization, and, while we've disrupted their operation, there may still be others out there." Aisha nodded but didn't release Richard's hand. "Will I be able to see Marcus? To know that he's safe?" "You'll be reunited with your fiancé within the hour," Agent Chen assured her. "He's been beside himself with worry. The only thing that kept him from falling apart completely was knowing that we had teams searching for you." As the paramedics prepared to close the ambulance doors, Aisha pulled a small piece of jewelry from her dress, a delicate gold bracelet that had somehow survived the ordeal intact. "This was a gift from Marcus when he proposed," she said, holding it out to Richard. "I want you to have it, as a reminder that good people still exist in this world." Richard shook his head. "I can't take that. It's too important to you." "Please," Aisha insisted. "Marcus will understand. You gave me back my life today. This is the only way I can think of to say thank you." Reluctantly, Richard accepted the bracelet. It was warm from her skin and felt surprisingly heavy for such a delicate piece. "I hope you and Marcus can still have the wedding you planned," he said. "Maybe not today, but soon." Aisha smiled, and, for the first time since he had found her in the woods, the expression reached her eyes. "We will. And you'll be invited. After everything that's happened, I think we'll both want to celebrate life and the people who fight to protect it." As the ambulance drove away, Agent Chen turned to Richard. "There's still a lot of paperwork to complete, but I want you to know that your actions today were instrumental in breaking open a case that we've been working on for months. The evidence we gathered from those two men, combined with Marcus Williams' testimony, should be enough to take down Blackwater Solutions permanently." Richard watched the ambulance disappear around a bend in the mountain road, carrying Aisha toward safety and a reunion with the man she loved. The gold bracelet felt warm in his palm, a tangible reminder of how quickly life could change and how important it was to act when action was needed. "Agent Chen," he said, "I need to ask you something. How did those men know I would be on this property today?" "They were waiting for us when we left the woods." The FBI agent's expression grew serious. "That's something we're still investigating. It's possible they were conducting surveillance on your property as a potential hiding place, or there might be other factors involved. We'll know more once we've interrogated the suspects." As they walked back toward the ranger station where crime scene technicians were still processing evidence, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that his involvement in this case wasn't entirely coincidental. The timing, the location, the fact that he had chosen to check his property boundaries that particular morning, it all seemed too convenient to be random chance. But those questions would have to wait. For now, it was enough to know that Aisha was safe and that justice would be served. As he climbed into the passenger seat of Agent Chen's vehicle for the drive back to civilization, Richard realized that his quiet, predictable life had been forever changed by his decision to investigate a crying sound in the woods. The gold bracelet caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the car window, creating tiny reflections that danced across the dashboard like stars. It was a small reminder of hope in a dark world, and Richard knew he would treasure it always. 2 weeks after the incident at Copper Mountain, Richard found himself sitting in a federal courthouse in downtown Denver, waiting to testify before a grand jury. The ornate building, with its marble columns and vaulted ceilings, felt imposing and formal, a stark contrast to the natural beauty of the mountains where everything had begun. Agent Chen had prepared him thoroughly for what to expect, but Richard still felt nervous as he reviewed his written statement one final time. The events of that Saturday morning felt both impossibly distant and vividly immediate, like a dream that refused to fade even in daylight. The investigation had moved quickly once Blackwater's operatives were in custody. The two men who had pursued Richard and Aisha, identified as former military contractors named David Kruger and Tommy Vance, had initially maintained their silence. But, when faced with federal kidnapping charges and evidence linking them to multiple illegal operations, Vance had begun to cooperate. His testimony had revealed the scope of Blackwater Solutions' activities, which went far beyond the security breach that Marcus Williams had uncovered. The company had been conducting unauthorized surveillance on American citizens, selling information to foreign buyers, and using intimidation tactics against anyone who threatened to expose their operations. "Mr. Hamilton?" A court clerk appeared beside him. "They're ready for your testimony." Richard followed her through heavy wooden doors into the grand jury room, where 23 citizens sat in tiered seating, their faces reflecting a mixture of interest and grave concern. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Janet Morrison, guided him through his testimony with practiced efficiency. He described finding Aisha in the woods, the chase down the mountain roads, and the confrontation at the ranger station. The grand jurors listened intently, asking few questions but clearly engaged by the dramatic nature of the events. When Richard finished, nearly an hour later, he felt drained but satisfied that he had done his duty. As he left the courthouse, Richard was surprised to find Marcus Williams waiting for him on the steps. He had spoken briefly with Marcus during the investigation, but this was their first real meeting. The DHS analyst was younger than Richard had expected, probably in his late 20s, with an earnest face and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who spent more time with computers than people. "Mr. Hamilton," Marcus said, extending his hand. "I wanted to thank you personally before the media circus starts. What you did for Aisha, for both of us, really, there aren't words for it." Richard shook his hand, studying the younger man's face. "How is she doing?" "I know this has been incredibly difficult for both of you." "She's strong," Marcus replied, pride evident in his voice. "Stronger than I think either of us realized. The whole experience has changed her, but not in the way you might expect. She's more determined now, more focused on making a difference in the world." They walked down the courthouse steps together, both men seemingly reluctant to end the conversation. The October afternoon was crisp and clear, with the kind of Colorado sky that made the mountains look close enough to touch. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said as they reached the sidewalk. "Agent Chen told me you've been asking questions about why those men were on your property that morning. Have you learned anything new?" Richard hesitated. The question that had been nagging at him for 2 weeks was difficult to voice, partly because it sounded paranoid even to his own ears. "I've been wondering if my finding Aisha was really just a coincidence. The timing, the location, it all seems too convenient." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face him directly. "You think you were set up somehow?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I just can't accept that sometimes good things happen by accident." Richard paused, then continued. "I've lived on that property for 5 years, and I almost never go out there on weekend mornings. But, that particular Saturday, something made me feel restless, like I needed to check the boundaries. I can't explain it. Actually, Marcus said slowly, I might be able to explain it. There's something I haven't told the FBI yet, something I wanted to discuss with you first. They found a quiet coffee shop nearby and settled into a corner booth where they could speak privately. Marcus ordered a black coffee and stared into the cup for a long moment before speaking. 3 days before Aisha was kidnapped, I received an anonymous email at my work address. It was just a few lines, warning me that my fiancé was in danger and that I should trust no one in my department. The email also said that if anything happened to Aisha, I should look for help from the man who walks the mountain roads on Saturday mornings. Richard Felt.